All right, welcome everyone to the Joint Common Council Planning Commission meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Molly, you got your work cut out for you tonight on the roll call.
All right, Alderperson Henry. Here. Alderperson Schaefer. Here. Alderperson Valdy. Here. Alderperson Dean. Here. Alderperson Grimmer. Here. Alderperson Price. Here. Alderperson Eicher.
Here.
Mayor Atwell.
Present.
Administrator Hafner.
Here.
Commissioner Cahalan.
Here.
Commissioner Hausman.
Here.
Commissioner Jashinsky.
Here.
And alphabetically, I'm going to skip this one right now. Commissioner Schultz. Here. Commissioner Weiler.
Here.
Commissioner Merrick.
Here.
I'm sorry, I could have shared.
Nicely done, nicely done. Thank you. All right, we'll get right into the business. We're having a special order of business and a joint meeting here so that we can hear this presentation and ask questions so that we're all better informed about the topic. So we'll move on to number 4, introduction of City Planner Amy Barrows and presentation by the new Executive Director of Waukesha County Center for Growth, WCCG, Nicole Reif, regarding the role and recent accomplishments at WCCG and information related to the viability of a business park use as part of the Highway 83 corridor in the city of Delafield, followed by questions and discussion regarding the same.
Okay, so this joint meeting was scheduled in order to introduce Nicole Reff. She's in the audience in the front here. She is the new Executive Director of Waukesha County Center for Growth.
Excuse me, if you could please speak into the mic.
Sorry, sir. The City of Delafield is a relatively new partner of Waukesha County Center for Growth. I believe last year was your first year, if I'm correct. And so I will let Nicole do her own introduction, but I did want to just go into a topic real briefly in addition to introducing what they do as an organization and what they've been up to. She's also going to talk about viability of business park uses along Highway 83. That is a question that has come up at our recent Plan Commission meetings. I know some of you have been present at those Plan Commission meetings. The people to my back have heard plenty from me regarding this topic. But as part of the Economic Development Land Use Focus project, which was completed about a year ago now, we're now going through each project, as you all know, reviewing the recommendations of that focus group. And right now, we're working through the Highway 83 corridor. It was recommended by the focus group that the area should be considered for responsible growth. And right now, if you look at the land use plan map, most of the area between the railroad tracks and Vedelson Road and Oakwood Church is in an agricultural category and it's zoned for agricultural purposes. The group had recommended that that this area be placed in the planned mixed use category, transitioning from business park type uses along Highway 83 to medium density residential to lower density residential as you go east to west. The purpose behind doing that is to reduce the city's budget deficit and then also to encourage a strong, sustainable economy, which includes a mix of diverse housing, business uses, provide job opportunities, recreational opportunities, and preserve open spaces, which would also be part of this effort. So as part of the recommendations that we're discussing at Plan Commission, if a category like this were to pass, there would be a special use designation placed on top of a planned mixed category. That would give us an opportunity to be more specific about expectations. So, some of the things that have been discussed are limitations on the amount of traffic that would be allowed through the site, traffic being able to travel westbound into some subdivision streets, or I should say not allowing commercial traffic to travel westbound into those streets. Compatibility with existing land uses, and then master planning for the whole area. So there are several ownerships on the north and south side of the river. We would at least want to see how these sites could potentially be master planned, although they could be developed individually. When we talk about, building a sustainable economy and balancing the budget deficit, some of the reasons why that group chose business park uses along this specific corridor relate to the fact that the mix of uses in the city include over 35% of the city is in residential category, just over 3% is in commercial, 4% is in mixed use, and then 0.18 is in industrial. The industrial or business park type uses, because again, the Plan Commission is discussing very low intensity type uses in this area. The cost of community services study indicates that those types of industrial / business park uses cost the city about 67 cents to $1 of revenue, where residential is closer to $1 to $1. We are going to be doing a little bit of a deeper dive on that to determine the city of Delafield does have very high, what's the word I'm trying to use? Your residential has a very high value to it. So we are going to do a little bit of a deeper dive to see what the comparison could be in this area, comparing business park versus residential. One of the things the Plan Commission did discuss is if the market indicates that residential is more appropriate than business park, that could be another allowable use. Another use that has come in as a potential possibility is senior living. The city does have an aging population and a need for senior living complexes, and that is already built into the code as a conditional use in business districts. So if this did go into that category, it would be something we could consider the way the code's written now. So in the future, I will go through, I will prepare a more significant staff report for council after Plan Commission irons out some of the things that they're talking through. And really at this point, we're working through special use designation language and then making sure that the map is appropriate. So once we get there, recommendation will come to council. I believe at this next Plan Commission meeting, which is next week already, we will be considering a resolution. That doesn't mean it's going to pass right away. We have to, again, work through the language and see where we land. So with that, I just wanted to give a little intro on 83 because Nicole's going to talk about 83, and I wanted to make sure all the common council members knew why. Okay? And then I can help answer any questions after she's done. Thank you.
Come on up, Nicole.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor, thank you so much for the invitation to come and present to the group tonight. We're so grateful for your support at the Waukesha County Center for Growth and really excited about this partnership. So I'm here, as Amy mentioned, to talk a little bit about what we do at the Center for Growth, opportunities and ways in which we can collaborate with you all and support you and your business community, and then touch a little bit on what we think the opportunities are around Highway 83 based on our understanding of what the needs are here when it comes to those business park types of uses, what type of volume we're seeing, with interest in that type of use, and just basically emphasizing the fact that there really is a lack of that type of available space. So I think there's a really great opportunity for you here in the city of Delafield. So just wanted to give a quick introduction to myself. I've been on the job now for about 3 months. It's gone by really quickly. And when we knew we were moving back here, we've been gone about 8 years, living down in Austin, Texas. I was working for the governor there for about 6 years, and then had been out in Virginia. Found out we were moving back to Wisconsin, had this great opportunity for me to take this job and serve this community. And we came back for 48 hours to look for housing and spent 2 of those hours here in Delafield, and we knew right away this is where we wanted to be. So I'm thrilled to be living here in Delafield, love the quality of life, and thank you to you all for everything you do to make this such a great community. So again, been on the job here for about 3 months, so I'm glad to answer any questions throughout this presentation. If I don't know the answer for you, I will look it up because I've got a good team that I can rely on for that. Next slide, please. So you'll see here, this is our team that's kind of at the core of the Center for Growth. We are really a one-man shop. I'm the only full-time staff of the Center for Growth, but we're really good at leveraging partnerships to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our constituent communities. So we do partner with the Waukesha County Business Alliance. You're probably very familiar with them. Just celebrated their 104th anniversary last week at their annual meeting. Great business organization, and we have a lot of shared staff amongst those two groups. You'll see Robin Lucky there. She focuses on on talent attraction and development, so helping with your businesses and, helping to get that workforce that they might need. And then the Small Business Development Center, we're one of 3 counties in the entire state that has a very unique agreement with the Small Business Development Center where they provide counseling directly to our county businesses rather than just serving them out of a university system office. So we see a lot of really intensive business counseling help with developing business plans, putting together capital stacks from that group. Really good opportunity there. Next slide, please. So I would typically categorize what we do into 2 categories. One would be supporting our businesses and helping them grow, and the other area would be supporting our communities and helping them grow. So this first area of focus that I'll talk about here is how we support our business community. So we do a lot around supporting our existing businesses, and I would call that business retention and expansion. Needless to say, we have a great manufacturing base here in the county. We have a great kind of supplier base within the county, healthcare, all those key industries that you're very familiar with. We're here to help those businesses grow. So we get out, we visit with them, we find out what their needs are, help them connect with workforce opportunities, help them, maybe navigate permitting processes where they may have those challenges, look for state incentives where that's appropriate. We also do a lot with business attraction. So we work with a lot of our partners like WEDC and the Milwaukee 7 for companies that are looking potentially to locate here in Waukesha County. And we help them find space, help them connect with partners like the city of Delafield to understand, all the great aspects of their communities. As I mentioned earlier, we do a lot around workforce development, so we work closely with WCTC and a lot of our other educational partners to make sure that all of our employers here are getting access to the labor they need, the training that they need. And we're also starting to do a lot more around marketing for talent as well. And then I also had mentioned that small business counseling. So that's a really important focus of what we do. So far this year, the SBDC has served over 150 small businesses in Waukesha County, which is huge. And a lot of that is very time intensive. It's really helping them think through what their business should look like. How can they be successful? Next slide, please. So this next area, I'll talk a little bit about how, I really consider the Center for Growth to be an extension of your team here in the city of Delafield. Obviously you all wear a lot of hats. I know the mayor, Tom, I know, Amy, you all are working on a lot of different initiatives and serving your constituents, making sure that the city is a great place to live, work, and play. So we're here really to provide that technical expertise so that you don't have to do that or you don't have to hire a full-time person that's focused on economic development. So as I mentioned earlier, we're really that conduit to those big economic development partners. We host an ED roundtable every quarter for our local investor communities to learn about new trends and to kind of troubleshoot together and talk about best practices and help each other out. And then we do a lot around data and analytics. So I'm sure a lot of you know data is expensive. So if we're able to kind of crowdsource that through one avenue, which is the Center for Growth, you all don't have to pay for these data sets. We're paying them, and then we're able to disseminate that information to our partners. One example of that is a community profile that we do in conjunction with SewerPAC, the Regional Planning Commission. And that's something that looks at commute sheds, it looks at what are your key industries and how you can support them here in your community. And then the last piece, this is something I would say that's a little bit newer that we're getting into, and that's more on the marketing side. So I come from a more kind of traditional economic development background, and something that Waukesha County hasn't been doing a lot of, which makes sense because we're just a county, we can only allocate so many resources to so many efforts. But we haven't been doing a lot of external marketing, and I think we have a great story here. I mean, you look around, look at the quality of life here. I mean, driving around looking at the leaves, seeing the lakes, all the recreational opportunities are incredible. You've got a great business base, a very pro-business environment, an excellent workforce that wants to go to work, wants to work hard. And I think that's a great story. And I think that we can tell that story in a very cost-effective manner. So we are redoing our website, we're redoing our newsletter to make that more externally facing, to ensure that any businesses that are looking at doing anything here, whether they are already here in Waukesha and they're looking at expanding, somebody new that's looking at coming here, or talent that's looking at moving here, has access to great information about why they want to be here in Waukesha County. And again, I think it's a great story to tell. So we'll be relying, on a lot of information that we can find about the city of Delafield as an example of something that we're promoting. So we'll have a talent piece of that website. So someone says, hey, I'm getting recruited to go work at Milwaukee Tool. I'm moving here from California. Where should I live? And they'll be able to look at all this great information about, what are these great opportunities of where they can live and enjoy living in Waukesha County. Next slide, please. Just the last piece I wanted to touch on as far as our organization is concerned is that we do have a great financing tool as part of the Center for Growth. We've partnered with 4 banks, and you'll see them listed here, to develop this revolving loan fund that's really intended to provide gap financing for businesses that are not quite fully bankable. So you may have a situation where it's a newer business, it might be a little bit riskier, bank doesn't want to finance the whole deal, or an existing business that's trying something new. You know, they're adding a new line, trying to get into, you know, a new part of their industry, and the bank may say, that's a little bit too risky for me to fund that. So this is something that we can get involved in. Right now, we have 7 loans in the portfolio. I would say about half of them are more like in the commercial and retail space, but the other half are in manufacturing. And we're looking to do more and more manufacturing type of deals, but we really can support any type of business. We do work with the Milwaukee Economic Development Corporation, which is a finance organization, to underwrite those loans. They also have a huge portfolio, and they're able to kind of come behind our loans. Right now we have a cap of $250,000. All of our loans are significantly more than that because MEDC has additional resources to put behind those loans. So they've been a really great partner of ours, always looking to add more banks. And then County Executive Paul Farrow just announced last week that he's working with the county board, and it in theory should be approved during the county budget, that they'll be allocating roughly $4 million to the Grow Fund to add to that overall pot of money, which is very exciting. So we'll be able to grow that opportunity there as well. Go ahead. Yes.
Do you mind if I
Yes, sir.
interrupt you as you're going along?
Absolutely. Please
Okay,
do.
Thank you so much. Just a quick question. You said you're looking to do more manufacturing, encourage more manufacturing. Where does that?
A lot of that comes from the concept of primary jobs. And so, you know, in economic development, traditionally you want to look at what you would call publicly traded sectors or primary jobs, which is a job that makes something or can export something. And then that has that ripple effect in the economy. So if you make something, you have suppliers that you're drawing in. So you're spending money on, you know, supplies that are coming in. Your workers, you know, they have a salary and then they're spending money out in the community. So typically you want to look at things at a county or regional or state level that really kind of moves the needle more broadly. Whereas once you get, you know, very hyper local, you know, looking at the city of Delafield, for example, you have great retail around here, all these neat little boutiques, and, you know, you look at grocery stores and things like that. That gets a little bit more at the level of something that's driven by there being a manufacturing base and there being, you know, these other kind of bigger roles.
So you're implying you get more bang for your buck by pursuing manufacturing versus.
That's exactly right. Yep. And I would say, you know, office projects and things like that as well. You know, you want to look at something that has a ripple effect in the economy and is not market driven. So, you know, for instance, Delafield obviously is doing great. You know, you've got good housing, great quality of life. So that leads to all these great little restaurants and shops and things like that popping up. If you don't have the population and you don't have the jobs for people to be working in, they can't afford the housing and they can't afford to then go to, you know, boutiques and restaurants and things like that.
But that doesn't necessitate that you're solely focused.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. Yep. We're focused on pretty much anything you can think about. For the most part, we stay away from retail for me personally, but Lucy and Phil, our SBDC consultants, they'll work directly with retail clients. But yeah, we'll work with any industry. We'll support, you know, as long as it's legal. Always have to add that caveat. But we'll work with pretty much anybody. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, that's a really great point for me to pause. That was pretty much the background on the Center for Growth. So I'm glad to answer any questions about that or talk more about the organization if there's anything specifically that you'd like me to touch upon.
Tom, I believe this is the 3rd year that we've been a member, just
That's right.
to make that accurate.
And we're thrilled. So you're our newest community that's become a partner of the organization, and we're really thrilled about that. And maybe that, you know, kind of begs the question of what is the difference between the city of Delafield, which pays to be part of our organization, and a community that doesn't. So obviously the county has, I think, 37 different municipalities. 15 of them are members of the Center for Growth currently. And for those members, a lot of those kind of data and marketing pieces, they do not have access to that. So any of the community profiles, or let's say that you're going out and you're trying to recruit some retail and you need some data, you need some market research, we can help with that. A community that's not part of the Center for Growth, they would not have access to that. Additionally, when it comes to business retention and expansion, when we go out and we meet with companies in a community, we will always include the staff or an elected official, whoever wants to be part of that, in those visits in our investor communities. That's not necessarily going to be the case in our non-investor communities.
Has the city utilized that data in the last 2 years? Do you recall?
Where's Amy?
I know it's been an education process of what the data is,
Okay.
and staff being aware of it. And I'm not sure, other than the example we have here tonight, where we're using some of that data and background and research to help us better understand the viability of proposals in this area. I think we're still learning about how to use that data. Take some time.
Amy, was any of that data used for the focus group?
Yeah, we did.
Oh.
As part of
You're gonna have to mic.
As part of the overall study, we did use, instead of having a market analysis completed, which I think the city originally was going to start with a market analysis that would have costed about $20,000, we chose to use existing information, and a lot of that information did come from the Business Alliance, which is a partner of Center for Growth.
And just to add to that, I'm available anytime for anything that you all might need. And so, I would just, extend the offer of, we are an extension of your team. And the mayor, Tom, Amy knows that. Amy and I talk frequently, about whatever those needs might be. And if we don't have the answer to it, the good thing is we have all those partnerships that we're able to work with, Sewer Pack or whoever it might be to get whatever type of information y'all might need. Thanks. Anything else before we move on to the growth corridor conversation? Okay, great. Next slide, please. So as we just talked about, we do have access to a lot of really good information that I think will help in your conversation around the Highway 83 corridor and looking at that as a growth area. So you'll see here, we partner with the Waukesha County Business Alliance on a biannual survey of the business community, just to kind of get our finger on the pulse of what's going on and try to understand a little bit of the direction of where we should be going to ensure we're really serving the business community. So you'll see here in 2021, 35 municipalities were represented in the county, which is great. So that's almost every community, over 20 different business sectors. So that's everything from retail to manufacturing, office, healthcare, you name it. And you'll see the key areas of focus. So the main kind of topics that came up during the survey would be workforce development, business growth, physical specifications, and economic visioning. Next slide, please. And I think that these next two slides are going to be the most helpful pieces of information to kind of add to your conversation when you're talking about this Highway 83 growth corridor. So you'll see here that in 2021, almost 80% of businesses in Waukesha County indicated that they're planning to expand in the next 3 years. That's huge, right? And that could mean an expansion of their space because they're adding a line. It could mean adding headcount. It could mean a number of things, but in a lot of cases, it means more space. So if we can see the next slide, please. You'll see here that about 50% of businesses are already fully maxed out in the space that they have. So that means that when they are ready to expand, they either are going to have to add to their existing building. In a lot of cases, that's not possible. I'm sure you've seen some business parks in the area where everything's pretty much fully built out. You may have communities that have green space requirements, so they're not really able to expand beyond where they are. So you have a lot of situations of businesses that are looking to expand. They want to stay in the county, but they're probably going to have to move out of the space that they're in. You'll also see that about 26% of the businesses are using more than 75% of their space. So we're looking at about 3/4 of the business community that's potentially in a situation where they may be looking to expand here and maybe needing new space here in the next couple of years. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, I've worked in Texas and in Virginia for the last 8 or so years. And something that we're just seeing as a trend in economic development across the country, particularly as you get kind of north, so Midwest and the East Coast, is there is a shortage of land for industrial and business park development. A lot of that comes down to, number one, land is built out already. 2, it's getting very expensive. And 3, zoning can be a little bit challenging for these types of uses, depending on the community. So we're seeing really a lack of inventory for developable land. In addition to that, we're seeing a lack of inventory of buildings because obviously there's so much demand for businesses to be growing. They're taking up all the space. They may be outgrowing the space that they're in. So there's just not a lot of buildings that are even out there, if a business is looking for something that's existing. So just kind of a little bit of background on the situation as far as, kind of these business park and industrial uses are concerned. So at this point in time, kind of with the cost of land in general and the cost of building a building, it is really not cost competitive to build a 30 to 50,000 square foot building. And there's a need for that size of space, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But the sweet spot really is that 100 to 250,000 square foot building, and it can be a building that has multiple tenants in it. So you'll see there's a building that I'll show you later that's in the city of Pewaukee that was just built out about 100,000 square feet. Now that they're marketing it to multiple tenants, it's almost all leased up already. When they were originally looking at just 100,000 square feet, one user, not quite as popular. So starting to see a lot more need for those multi-tenant buildings. Something that I found that's been really interesting in Waukesha County, and I think is something that should be a point of pride here, is that we have a lot of family-owned businesses in Waukesha County. So you've got, kind of the mom or dad who kind of started the business, or maybe their grandparents started the business years ago. They're still involved and looking to grow. And traditionally, what you've seen is that family-owned businesses want to own their own building versus leasing something. That is starting to shift a little bit, and that's recent. That's over the last, 5 to 10 years. And a lot of it is coming down to businesses are transitioning away from being a family business in some cases because the next generation doesn't want to take over. In those cases, you're seeing private equity firms that are taking over these businesses, and they do not want to own a building. They want to lease some space. So that's an opportunity there. And I would say, Waukesha County in general, and just talking to a lot of brokers and developers here, there is just not a lot of land to develop. And there, like I said before, just not a lot of buildings that are available. So there's huge demand, but not a lot of supply. Next slide, please. So something I just wanted to touch upon really briefly is manufacturing in general, and especially in Waukesha County. So I've had the privilege of touring, I want to say about 8 to 10 manufacturers over the last 2 months since I've been on the job here. And this manufacturing, and I think, when I was explaining this to the mayor and to Tom, they put it right. This is not your grandfather's manufacturing operation, right? This is highly automated, very sophisticated, very clean, quiet, requires a high skill set. Very different than what you would picture as kind of like the old school welding fabrication type of plants. Everything is much more sophisticated, very engineering heavy, a lot of robotics. And so you're seeing less headcount, so less people maybe working on a line, but lots more robotics, a lot more sophistication and what the types of skill sets that are needed to run those types of machines. So it's been really interesting seeing that. It's not really what you kind of picture of the manufacturing of the past. It's really the manufacturing of the future, and that's here now. We're also seeing a lot of employers are investing in automation because they just can't find people, right? I mean, we're all talking about this. Where did the workers go? And for manufacturing, there are solutions, and solutions are automation. Next slide, please. So, the opportunity for Delafield, I think the area that you're looking at makes a lot of sense. You're really preserving that great quality of life. You're preserving the gateway to your community, which is, Highway C coming off the freeway. It really makes a lot of sense, the location as well between Highway 16 and I-94. And something that I think is really unique and special is that you're signaling to the development community that you're interested in at least talking about this. You're interested in potentially supporting appropriate development in that location. And really, ultimately, this is the most minimally invasive place that you could put these types of kind of business park or light industrial uses. I love the fact that Amy is talking about cost of community services. So I used to work for UW Extension, and I spent a lot of time talking about that. And, obviously, the bang for your buck is there when you're looking at light industrial uses. You're spending a lot less as a city to support that. And then ultimately, those uses all kind of play off of each other. It's exactly what you had mentioned, sir, earlier, of one business feeds into the next, feeds into the next. So you have this great housing here. You have people living in houses. They're supporting all the local small businesses. You have manufacturers that are buying supplies from other small businesses in the area. So it's a really good kind of circular economy to have kind of varied uses and diversified uses. Next slide, please. And then, just lastly, I would say that demand for that 100,000 to 250,000 spec business type of building is definitely there. So if you provide an opportunity for a developer to come in and build a spec building, I think that is something that would probably happen relatively quickly, particularly if there aren't too many restrictions on the types of uses there. And then, again, I think it's really interesting talking to all these businesses here in Waukesha County that need to grow and they want to stay here, right? They want to stay where their workforce is. They want to stay where they've been successful. They have this pro-business climate and there is not land available for that. So why not Delafield? Why not be targeting some of these family businesses or these businesses that are transitioning here that are looking for new real estate opportunities? And then just the last thing I would add to this piece is that it really can be, compatible with residential. So I was driving around today, kind of in that corridor, driving through those couple of different Heartland business parks. I know one aesthetically and kind of from a planning standpoint, the newer one seems to make a lot of sense. You've got a lot of residential that's backing up on that. But you see in those cases, they're beautiful buildings. There's a lot of landscaping. There are a lot of buffers. So you can really provide for compatible uses, especially when you don't have a lot of truck traffic or anything like that going through that corridor. Next slide, please. And then just a couple considerations as you continue to talk about this topic. So just in talking to a lot of the development community here, just in general about, what they are looking for, spec developers are going to be looking for TIF support. And so if what you want is to have something happen sooner, so that you can have something contributing to the tax base potentially sooner, you may want to allow for TIF in these cases if that's something that you'd like to have moved more quickly. That's also probably the quickest way to get to scale, is to have a developer involved, someone who may build out one of these multi-tenant buildings, but it's not a requirement. So depending on your timing, depending on what you're looking at doing, you can definitely look to not do TIF if that does not make sense for your city. The other piece that I would add is the more restrictions you put on the development, obviously the less opportunities you'll have. That's pretty common sense, obviously. But, something to keep in mind is as you're having more automation and manufacturing and things like that, it is important to allow for kind of taller buildings in those cases and the taller doors. They need to be getting, newer equipment coming in and out of the building, and have some flexibility in how they can kind of move their lines around as they're kind of planning out and they're expanding within their footprint. And then just the last piece I would add too is related to distribution. So definitely understand a lot of communities do not want a lot of distribution and logistics in their community. And we've seen even areas where they've had a lot of it traditionally, they're really scaling it back because it can, have a lot of wear and tear on your roads, can have a lot of traffic. A couple good things. One, this is not an area that necessarily would be targeting that anyway. You aren't going to see a lot of distribution and logistics companies looking to locate. They're usually a little bit closer to the urban core, closer to those main transportation hubs. But one thing that you may want to consider is allowing for limited distribution capabilities. And the main reason for that is if you make something, you need to ship something out, right? So if you have manufacturers, you want them to be able to have the capability and the ability to be kind of shipping things out of their facility once those value add products are completed. So with that, I'll just run through a couple of pictures here. I think I've got 2 slides of some examples. So, I think as you drive around, as you see different business parks, there are ones you like that are really aesthetically pleasing and others that, you think maybe this could be a little bit more of a community asset if we change it up a little bit. So you can do a lot around aesthetics and requiring that, as part of your approval process. So you'll see here a couple of examples of kind of more decorative facades, a lot more glass, and, just more decorative signage and things like that. You'll see a lot of landscaping requirements. So providing those buffers from the road and making things just more visually appealing. Next slide, please. And just this last building, this is the one in Pewaukee that I had mentioned. It has really good visibility from the interstate. And then you'll see here that bottom left picture, that's the front, so like the entry point of the building. And you'll see there's a lot of glass. If you go in the building, it's really light and airy, lots of kind of natural light coming in through there. But you really have the ability to kind of determine what you want the area to look like, and then provide, guidelines along those lines. Go ahead.
Was this Milwaukee project?
I don't think that was, but I can verify that. I don't think that the city of Pewaukee does TIF, from what I understand, but I can verify that for you. Absolutely. Glad to answer any questions or take any feedback with more information that I can provide in the future.
Are there a percentage of communities that TIF, and do you have an idea of those that do and those that don't? What pushes one community to TIF and another not to?
That's a great question. Totally fair. Yeah, I think every community is different in what their needs are, and what their priorities are. I would say probably the majority of communities use TIF in some fashion in a strategic way, right? And a lot of them are having these really involved conversations of, is this worth it? Do we really want this development? Is this what we need to do to make it happen? But there are communities like the city of Pewaukee that's very successful in attracting industrial development and other types of development, and they don't really traditionally use TIF. So I think it's really a matter of the direction of the elected officials and the residents, obviously. So I'm glad to look into that though and find out if there's some kind of stats along who's using TIF versus who isn't.
The need for space
Yes, sir.
data, is there any trend data on that locally? Because just thinking of the increase in work from home and sort of the post-COVID transition that a lot of companies have gone through, how is that changing?
I think that's a great question. So something that we're all racking our brains over is what is the future of office, right? I think everybody's trying to figure out. I think, did I see Harley today just announced that they're repurposing their headquarters? I mean, it's a shift. It's a huge shift, right, in how work is happening. I think the positive thing is that, again, coming back to manufacturing, healthcare, a lot of that is just continuing to grow and continuing to need space because there are jobs that you just can't do, without being in person. I think office is the biggest wild card on that one, and I don't think anyone knows the answer to that yet. I wish I did. I would be very rich.
So I have a few questions. So this is my district where this is, and I'm concerned with this presentation entirely because we've been meeting. I mean, I've met with my constituents, and the Planning Commission has been discussing this at a couple of meetings, and this is not at all what's been discussed. Like, this is exactly the opposite of what has been said. Like, this is exactly what the community has been saying that they don't want in this area. So I'm apologize, but I'm pretty emotional about this because this is exactly what has been said that we don't want. So I'm not sure where this is coming from, because even the discussions at the last Planning Commissions has been very clear that this is not the direction that the people want to go in. So where is this coming from now, and why is this coming up at this point in the stage where this has already been discussed a few times and this has never been even on the table as something that we would want in that area?
Yeah, so basically what the presentation here is it's the possibilities and the thought process and the data behind what the market is driving in this area based on what they've been able to research and their experiences, right? So obviously, some of the characteristics are things that the Planning Commission has been talking about, as you mentioned, about adding more green space. None of the pictures there show a lot of green space or things like that, but there's certainly things that's why we're creating a list of what the limitations would be, understanding, and that's part of this presentation here, is that when you put those limitations on it, you do limit the market ability of it, and this is kind of demonstrating some of those differences, right? So I would imagine, based on what I've heard the Planning Commission say, that this is one perspective, but they're looking at it from a little bit different angle, right? I don't think they would necessarily be interested in buildings of that size or any kind of. Those buildings look to me like they need a lot of heavy trucking, and that's definitely not the kind of thing that we would be looking for, any kind of heavy trucking. But to say no trucking, I think is probably, a step too far the other direction, right? So this is just all about the communication and possibility and the foundations of the things that we need to consider if this is the direction we want to go, of what we would need to do to be, potentially successful, right? And if a developer comes in and offers residential as an option, that nobody's stopping somebody from coming in and doing residential, right?
Right, but if somebody comes in proposing this, and we're discussing it now, we're having these discussions as this is a potential possibility for that area, that is not at all what the community on that. And I'm going to ask you, because I heard you say you wanted to be preserving Highway C. The chart, you said something, it was, I don't know exactly how your words were, but preserving Highway C and keep having this area as a potential. I don't understand that. Like, our community is the whole community. This area is horse properties, and it's a rural setting on purpose. Like, that's what this area is. It's not downtown Highway C, but we are not an industrial park. Mm-hmm. And this is concerning to me, and I'm going to leave it at that, because I'm
Danielle,
I'm upset by this.
Danielle, so Nicole was asked to be here, and my understanding is that the Plan Commission was looking for some expert advice on the demand for business park in the area. So
But this wasn't.
I
Okay.
have a comment. So in the context of your presentation, that you answered a lot of really good questions that we have had on the Plan Commission, and that is there demand? If you build it, will they come? Type of thing. Where's the demand? What's driving the demand? You gave us some good background into that. But and also the ideas and some of I think a couple of the last slides really hit to the heart of what we're trying to figure out, and that's balancing the horse properties with the idea that if you do open it up to the world and what's optimal for the business community to fill this need, it's likely not going to be in harmony with what's right next door. And so we're trying to go through these special use designation statements to determine what restrictions would prevent what we don't want. And if we do it to the point that it makes things, in our view, what would be in harmony with the area, does that eliminate the idea that this is going to fill up to the expectations and meet that 67 cents to the dollar goal we're looking for? And so I think that's going to be the net of, this is a very important piece of the input. And I think that last question I had is, if we do some of the no-nos you said, put restrictions on it, put building height restrictions, put green space requirements, do we then, we would be, I think, wanting to come back to your group and say, this is what our thoughts are on this area. What are your ideas on what this is going to do to the economic potential? Are we better off starting over, not doing it, or you know what I mean? But I think we're going to leverage your expertise later as a result of what we're talking about in the upcoming Plan Commission meetings. And so I don't believe this is a foregone conclusion saying, like, where are we going to put building A on this property, Danielle? So this is really the idea that I think we've established there's a clear demand for this in Waukesha County. To what extent can we exploit that demand to make things make sense? That's how I'm taking this, because we're not at any point of conclusion yet. So.
And we talked a little bit about the focus being manufacturing, and I understand the benefits and going where the money is. But is there also an opportunity for, I don't know what you want to call it, but office space or corporate headquarters or something of that nature? Let's bring Apple.
I know someone there.
But not exclusively manufacturing.
Right.
And I guess that's a question. Is there a lot of demand for something other than manufacturing vis-a-vis this?
I think you all make some really good points to that, and I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying. And I, as the mayor said, I was just brought here to share some third-party information about what the demand is for those types of uses that we're talking about here, and that's it. It's just, third-party information, want to be as helpful as I can, on the topic, understanding you need to decide what's best for your community, and we're here to support you in whatever that is. And if it's residential, that's great too, because then we can talk about all this additional residential development here that is a great place to live for people that are working in other areas in the county. So, appreciate your comments to that point. I think, you asked some good questions around other potential uses, and I don't know that there's much demand for new office space, right? I think right now it's a really tough sell. I think, I've seen actually a couple of interesting projects, particularly when I was in Texas, where there is some desire in being in these pastoral settings for office spaces. And so I don't know if there is some opportunity for like a smaller headquarters that would be interested in being here, because obviously you've got great proximity to the freeway, this excellent quality of life. People can be living in beautiful homes in the area. Maybe there would be an opportunity for like a smaller office type of project. I think that's a tough sell right now, just because I don't know that anyone is really investing much in office at this point in time. But 5 years from now,
Yes, office is a bad idea.
Healthcare.
We don't
Yep.
Our development downtown.
Right. And that's filling up, which is great.
Besides manufacturing and office space, but
Yeah.
other development opportunities are beneficial to the city in terms of cost of community services. If not light industrial and manufacturing, is there anything else?
Healthcare is always going to be one, but then you're looking at some of those traffic type of issues with a lot of people kind of coming in and out of the properties. I think that's something obviously you'd want to weigh out, but healthcare obviously keeps expanding. Like Tom said, senior living is a big one. Everybody's talking about that. I think we had 2 people contact us already this week, and I think, today's Monday, that are looking at doing senior living projects in the area. So that's an opportunity as well, if that's something that you're interested in. Not suggesting that you should be. But yeah, I think it's a little bit challenging to be looking at those other uses. And also, we're just like a little bit farther away here from the metropolitan area too, which can be kind of challenging for those other types of uses, if you want accessibility to the airport and things like that. But I do think, this region is growing. It's growing in this direction. And so, if you're looking at something for 3 to 5 years down the road, who knows what possibilities can open up. So I'm glad to keep looking into that and see what I can find out. One other thing I would add, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have a, maybe just not a question, but a request if you have this back to the data analytics side of it. So I'm in manufacturing, I am private equity, so I can relate. And I live here in Delafield, but our business is down in Union Grove, Highway 20 and 11 on 94, if you've been down there recently. So if you can combine any of your data with M7 so we get more of a regional, but here's the information would be interesting. What do you find is the normal drive times distance that workers will drive to a job? Anecdotally, in our manufacturing, it's about 30 to 35 minutes typically. So if that's true, and maybe it's not, you might have better data, how many light industrial businesses are within a, say, 25-minute drive of Delafield? That would be a piece of data that would hone in what is really the demand. Because when we talk about Waukesha County, it's a very macro view, and if you drive down south of Waukesha County, you're going to see a lot of farm fields. So there's a lot of spaces in Waukesha County where things could happen. And I guess municipalities that move fast will probably be the winners. But if you could help us with, not tonight obviously, but if you could give us any of that data, that'd be helpful.
I think that's a great point, and I'll try and talk loud so I can look at you when I'm talking. I'm sorry. I think the point that you bring up about talking to Milwaukee 7 is really important, and we're constantly talking about commute sheds, and that's something that's come up, in the community profiles that we're doing. And I'm sure that you know this, but a lot of the driver of that is how much money people are being paid and if they have transportation options, if they have their own car. So the manufacturers that I've been talking to that are looking at growing, or ones that have recently grown and moved to a new space, they were looking at properties within 5 to 7 minutes of where they're currently located because they don't want to lose anybody they have now. Anecdotal for sure. But I think that's a really good question and something that I will definitely look into and get back to.
Yeah,
you on
they'll
that.
drive 20 minutes, but it doesn't have to be 5 to 7. But
Right.
when you get outside of 25, that's why we don't expand our business beyond 25
Right.
because we'll lose them. And
Exactly.
that's the premium decision making that goes on right now. So I think knowing how many companies fit specifically within that criteria is more of a relevant demand to Delafield's equation than just the macro Waukesha County.
I think that's a great point. I'll definitely get that information.
Thank
you.
Hey, Nicole, hopefully one more question. So one of the things we struggled with was along Highway 83, no one wants to live on 83 per se, but there's plenty of land that we could do development for residential. How do you split that up? In other words, we don't want some heavy-duty industrial along 83, but we've got a couple of small businesses that seem to represent possibilities for business in there. So I guess, if there's examples of that, that's helpful for us as well. Because I live in Danielle's district. I think what we're kind of feeling a little bit of is because the entry to Delafield is along Highway C. We're diametrically opposed to the other side of the city. So it's like we're kind of left at the back end of the city. So we're a little bit sensitive to it.
That's understandable, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. So are you talking about how to have those kind of complementary residential and also other uses in the same area? Is
Yeah,
that right?
again,
Okay.
split too, because
Right.
if this is real, and maybe it's not, but the sense we get is that no one wants to live on 83. It's a highway. Okay, we get that. A business might make more sense. We've got a couple of examples along the 3 of them in particular. Can you do that and split that reasonably and make it look presentable? I guess is something we're struggling with.
Right, yeah, I can definitely understand that. I think it's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that, but I think, something I can absolutely look into and get back to you. And I do think that a lot of it comes down to landscaping too. If you have kind of berms and you have a lot of trees and plants. I mean, just even driving around today, driving through Heartland and the newer business park that they have there. I mean, there's just a lot of vegetation that's a buffer between a lot of those uses, particularly with residential on one side. And I think, I've heard a little bit of the conversation about potentially having a boulevard as well in that area. Is that right? Looking at a boulevard in this development area and maybe having that be something that's kind of separating residential from the other types of uses? And I could be getting that wrong.
Maybe I missed it. I've missed other stuff.
What we've talked about is, we were getting concerned related to the traffic and how do you control that? And one of the comments that was mentioned, and maybe it wasn't in the meeting but by some of the commercial brokers just that we've talked to help understand what is and isn't viable, is that they don't want those commercial properties to be accessible by the residential folks either. They want to stay separated. So what a lot of developments will do is put in a boulevard style entrance, and then the commercial will go one direction and residential will go the other. And they really won't be connected in that regard, other than at the entrance.
Okay.
There's a whole municipal planning question to this, and I think Nicole's given us some great information on the economic opportunity. What's probably outside your scope, and the flip side of this is how do we develop this? What's the formula for making it compatible with residential? And I know it can be done. I worked in an office park with light manufacturing in a high-end Chicago suburb. It peacefully coexisted with the surrounding residential, which was residentially, it was a very high-priced, attractive area. And the industrial park that I worked in did not, worked. And I couldn't tell you how or why. There's a lot of factors to it. You mentioned, the building design, attractiveness, buffers, landscaping, all of these things. I can also name a dozen communities that have done this wrong. I think there's more wrong ways to do it than right ways. And with all due respect to the focus group, I don't think they were equipped to address that. I think Amy's probably all of the expertise in this area that we have, and you can't put that all on her. Do we need to, as we move ahead, do we need to get some expertise in this area, some consultant to advise us on how to make sure that we peacefully coexist with the existing residents? Because Danielle's right. I'm hearing the same kind of fear from my constituents about commercial and industrial in their quiet residential area. And there were a lot of upset people here. I mean, we had a focus group of 100 people here. That's a good focus group too, that feedback we're getting. And if you show them this picture with, I'm counting 30 truck docks on one side of the building, you're really going to get them upset.
All right. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Nicole, for coming in and sharing all that information. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And reach out if I can provide any other resources, and I'll follow up on these questions.
Yeah,
Thank
you can
you
get
so
them back
much.
to Amy, then we'll disseminate them to the folks that ask them. All right, so this agenda item, seeing no further business, we will now adjourn. So what will happen now is the Planning Commission is free to go if you'd like to. Mike has to format the DVD. That'll take about 5 to 10 minutes maybe, and then we'll reconvene for the next meeting. So thank you everybody for coming.